Please be greeted, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Mapala, and I am an academic tutor in the University of Johannesburg within the field of education. So as you can see by the title of this video, I want us to look at one of the most complicated things, or rather, that's what most people think they are complicated, whereas they are not. And those things are the teaching approaches, the teaching strategies, the teaching methods, and the teaching techniques. So the reason I want us to look at those things, as I said, most people think they are complicated, but if you just sit down and you try to study them, you'll just see that actually they are all interlinked, they are all related to each other. So how I'm gonna go through them, I tried to do what, to arrange them from the broad one up until to the least broad. So the first one that I want us to look at, or rather to briefly speak about, it is what we call the teaching approaches. So you see, the teaching approaches, that is like the umbrella of them all. The teaching approach, it is like the biggest of them all. That is what the teacher most of the time believes in. So if maybe you are trying to explain what the teaching approach is, you might say that a teaching approach is it is that philosophy, it is that, that framework that guides the entire lesson, or rather the entire, beliefs of the teacher, or of the lesson planning, of designing everything that is related to the teacher. So a teaching approach, it is most of the time what the teacher believes in, or rather what the teacher believes that actually this is the type of atmosphere that I should try by any means necessary to always build in my classroom. So for an example of a teaching approach, it may be what we call constructivism. Constructivism, most of the time they see it as a theory, but if you go and just look at it deep, you'll realize that actually it is an approach. So a constructivist teacher, or a teacher who believes, in constructivism, is that type of teacher who will do what, who will always try by any means necessary to make sure that his or her lessons are constructive enough. All those activities, lessons, whatever thing, practices that they do in their class, they would always make sure that they are building learners who are so constructive. You see that? That is the first one, or rather an example of a teaching approach. Another example of a teaching approach, it may be behaviorism. So behaviorism, or maybe we can say the behaviorist approach. So that one, it is also an approach. Why? Because of some teachers may believe that their lessons, or rather their classroom context, must be driven by a behaviorist type of approach, whereby you find that teachers always are focusing on behavior. They want to multiply good behavior within their classrooms. So that is one of the teaching approaches. And another aspect, or another one of them, it is what we call the teaching strategies. So this one comes after the teaching approach. As I said, I'm trying to arrange them from from being broad to being less broad. So the second one is going to be your teaching strategy. So teaching strategies are like what? They're actually informed by the teaching approaches. A teacher who uses a certain teaching approach would likely use certain teaching strategies, because of they want to align their teaching strategy with their teaching beliefs, which is the teaching approach. So they are like what? Teaching strategies, they're like the plans, they are like what the teacher is actually trying to do, trying to use to do what? To make sure that they reach those outcomes that they set for themselves. So an example of a teaching strategy can be what you call cooperative learning. So cooperative learning, for example, teaching strategy is a one where you'd find that a teacher is doing what, is always trying to evoke that spirit of cooperation among the learners. Whatever they do, the activities, they always try to bring about that spirit of cooperation. All those activities, group works, doing projects together, learners coming to the front sharing something together. That is a cooperative learning type of teaching strategy. And another one, it can be differentiated learning. So differentiated learning, it is also a teaching strategy. How is it a teaching strategy? Because of you'd find find that a teacher, whenever they are teaching, the activities that they use, they always do what, prioritize those different needs of their learners. So they would use different activities, different ways of assessing. Why? Because of they want to do what, to cater for all learning styles, just like that. So that is one of an example of teaching strategies. And going forward, we also have, what is this, the teaching methods. The teaching methods, you see, those ones, I think I can say that the simplest, even though they're not the simplest for some. So the teaching methods are rather, or if maybe someone wants to explain what the teaching method is, one person might say it is like it's a systematic way of doing things in the class. It is how the teacher does those activities that they plan, all those practices, however they do them, the format they use, the way they use, it can be referred to as as a teaching method. So however the teacher implements those things, however that lineage, that systematic way that they follow, that is a teaching method. So an example of a teaching method that we are mostly familiar with, it may be what you call the lecture method, where you find that the teacher just stand at the front and teaches that topic, whereas the learners are just listening, or rather active listening, however they may. So it is like, most of the time, the traditional way where you find that the teacher is teaching and the learners, it is a method. That way that the teacher uses, it is also a method. But now we are actually trying to advocate for teaching methods that are more, that are more learner-centered. So those types of teaching methods, those are the ones that at the moment, as 21st century teachers, we are trying to do what we are trying to implement in our classes. And then the last one, the last one of them all, are the teaching techniques. So the teaching techniques, you see, those ones, those are the actions, those are those simple practices that the teacher would do in their class to make sure that their teaching methods, their teaching strategies get to be done. So the teaching techniques are those smaller things, those small things that they would be done in the class. For example, of a teaching technique, it may be what you call Socratic questioning. So you find that the way the teacher questions the learners, those questions are not those questions that only want one-word answers. They are like open-ended questions, where you find that whenever the teacher asks that question, the learner's response, all of them, they won't be just one-word answers. They would have to broadly think and answer that question. That is one of the the teaching technique that you might be familiar with. And other teaching techniques, there's a lot of them. As I said, they're just those simple practice, those actions that the teacher tries by any means are necessary to use. And I think one of the teaching techniques that I like using is what I always use it at the beginning of the lesson, in the introduction. How I introduce my lessons is always full of tricks. It's always made by tricks. Learners are gonna be like, okay, what's happening? So it's all those tricks. Those are the teaching techniques. Those tricks that the teacher tries to use to make sure that everything, your teaching strategies and your teaching methods get to be done effectively. So I hope you tried, or rather by now, at the end of this video, you are now able to know, or rather actually have that small understanding of how are these things working together. They can never be or rather most of the time, a teaching method cannot work effectively if you don't have a teaching strategy. You see, so you need to have a teaching strategy so that it can inform your teaching method. You must have a teaching approach, your philosophy, your belief, so that you can do what? So that it can inform those teaching strategies, those teaching methods, those teaching techniques that you would use to make sure that at the end you reach your goal as a teacher, as a 21st century teacher. So if you reached to the end of this video, I hope you do understand now. You have that that understanding of how are these things working together. And if you have any questions, you can drop them in the comments, or you can reach me at my email. My email is going to be in the description. So thank you very much for staying up until now.